And this bloodline thing that is currently happening right now, that is really dominating professional wrestling and the TV landscape. I don't know if you guys read the latest Observer, but this is the first time ever in the history of television that pro wrestling won the week on broadcast. And that was last week's SmackDown. And that was, Jey Uso, the trial of Roman Reigns. And I'm just, with your background and just what you guys enjoy in entertainment, and we'll start with you, JD. Like, what is it about this bloodline thing that you think is capturing a fan base, not only the current WWE fan base, but a lapsed fan base that wasn't watching a year and a half ago?
I'm glad you asked this. I literally just wrote a 1,200 word piece for Voices of Wrestling talking about this, and specifically to the idea of story. The word story gets thrown around pro wrestling a lot, and I don't think people really know what story means. And don't know, I'm a writer, like a novelist by, that's my background. That's how I got into doing these things, is I write books, and I kind of stumbled into doing some wrestling writing and comics. I write comics too. So like, when I was taking writing classes, we talked about what the nature of story is and what it means to have a story. I'll never forget that the teacher on the first day says, what is a story? And I said, that's kind of subjective as to what it is, right? And he said, no, it isn't subjective. Very curt, very matter of fact. And I was like, dang. Okay, and this is the guy that brought the Guardians of the Galaxy back to prominence. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to what this dude says. A story, by its nature, is you have a character. Character has a goal. Something is standing in the character's way of achieving that goal. That is the essence of a story. And then from then it breaks into your 3 acts, and every act has your character beats and stuff like that. What is working with the bloodline thing isn't the fact that it's a story, because pro wrestling is a story. Anytime you have a pro wrestling match, it's a story. Guy wants to win a match, opponent standing in his way. That's the story. What's working with this isn't necessarily the idea that it's a story, it's character. Right? It's the character beats that are getting people. The Roman Reigns character is super easy to break down, right? He is a fallen son. He is the guy who was supposed to be handed everything and failed. And now that he has gotten back to prominence, he will do everything in his power to hang on to that. So he's become this manipulative, detestable person. But like a lot of good villains in TV, that becomes super appealing to people. Right? And it isn't necessarily the fact that it's a story that works. It's you've got a super relatable, interesting character, and Roman Reigns doesn't play him like he's the good guy. Like, Roman Reigns is very on top of, like, Joe Anoa'i understands the character he's playing. And when you've got that sort of a thing, when you've got a character that people can put their hooks into, it goes over everything. Like one of the things we talk about in writing is character over plot. Plot is overrated. Character is what people come back for. And this is a prime example of it. The Roman Reigns character and how everybody else kind of bounces within his orbit is why the bloodline is working right now.
Now, Mike, I'm sure your thought process is similar without the technical terms, but like, what is working for you? And maybe it's not working for you. I'm not sure if it is or not, but why do you think it's working for the majority of the fan base?
Well, it is working for me. And I might be on the opposite end of a lot of fans who are super hardcore AEW fans, who I think a lot of people resent the fact that it's working so well because they just don't quite understand it. Because if it's WWE, it must be crap. And then unfortunately for them, this is very good, right? And it's completely working. Ticket sales are up, PLE numbers are up, merchandise is up, ratings are up. They're destroying everything, and there's a lot of reasons why that is, but the bloodline is the focal piece, and I relate it to, like JD was saying, it's the characters and the depth of the characters, but it's also the performances of the wrestlers playing those parts and the performances of Paul Heyman too. Like, Roman's doing a great job in his role. Paul Heyman's doing amazing. Jey Uso's doing amazing. Jimmy's doing great. Solo Sikoa, in his kind of like stoic background character role as kind of a henchman, he's doing great. And then before that, you had Sami Zayn and you had Kevin Owens, and they were doing great. So everybody that gets pulled into that orbit has stepped their game up completely because they know how big this is. you know, the Bloodline to me, and I know, and people like calling it cinema and yada, that's all crap. But it does remind me of a serialized television show, something kind of like, you know, Yellowstone or something like that, right? Or John Muse, shout out buddy, like Banshee, right? or if you go back, you know, Dave Meltzer would probably reference Dallas. It's something like that. It's a family drama centered around the head honcho, right? Just like Yellowstone's a family drama centered around Kevin Costner's character, and then everybody gets pulled into that orbit, and then everybody has their own little intricate details of their character, and then they get pulled into it, and then the wrestling matches are secondary, right? The wrestling matches that they've had, other than, you know, obviously the tag team title match at WrestleMania was fantastic, 5 stars. I agreed with that. And then of course Roman and Sammy had their great match. Roman and Cody had a really good match. But for the most part, what people are actually remembering are the moments that are surrounding those matches. Sami Zayn finally turning on Roman, Jey Uso finally turning on Roman, and all of that, and the different plot points that they have. There's so many different sub stories within this overall, you know, kind of. JD, did I say it right? Serialized? Was that the correct term? Because you educated me before. Yeah, like, you know, a serialized thing. So we've had like different seasons of it, right? And I think that it's more in line with something like that, with like a Yellowstone, with like a Dallas. And Yellowstone and Dallas are two of the most popular television shows of all time. And they're just these great family dramas that people get sucked into.
You did.
So JD,
right.
based on the there you go. Based on the idea of story, what is the end game for this thing? Is it Roman Reigns on top of the world, has to lose everything, and then come back again? Like, to me, the second he turned heel, and this is even before the Bloodline thing took off, my thought was, oh, this is a way to eventually get him back as a hot babyface. Like, that's kind of what I think every turn is.
Yeah.
And so if the idea now is for Roman, who's on top of the world, he eventually, slowly but surely, loses everything. He has nothing. And then it's his climb back to getting somewhere. Like, is that what you see the overall story is? Or can they do something different with how I'm thinking?
So it depends on what the long game is. How, like, if you're looking at this from a scholarly position, when you reach the end of the story, the character is fundamentally changed by his experiences, right? And this is why a lot of stories don't work, because like you'll see a lot of writers will have really good act 2s, right? But they don't stick the landing. And a lot of times it's because they don't have that out. They forget about that outlook where the character, your lead character, your protagonist, has to be changed by his experiences. Like, and the people say, what about Indiana Jones? I'm like, no, that dude's totally changed at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. He's out for fortune and glory, and at the end, he literally, by seeing God's vengeance struck upon Nazis, learns that there's more important things in life, right? So Roman Reigns, this thing will go down. It will work. It will be the best it could be if by the end of it, there is a change to his character. Mm-hmm. Whatever that means, I don't know. Maybe it goes to him being a babyface. Maybe he does have to fall down and pick himself up. But I don't like playing the prediction game. All I know is that if we're going to keep on this trajectory, like if we're going to follow, you know, the Robert McKee outline and, you know, your basic hero's journey format, by the end of this, Roman Reigns has to be a different person than he went into it as.
And are there, like, you just said you don't want to predict, but do you have like certain things that you want to see where you're like, like I saw that too, and that would be a great way for them to continue this? Or are you just kind of like, I'm just watching?
When I'm watching a movie, when I'm reading comic, when I'm reading a book, I like to lose myself in what I'm doing, right? I don't like to analyze something until after the fact. Wrestling is different because of the way it plays out in these serialized chapters. So I'm on the ride, and I'll be honest with you, I don't love it. I'm not a huge fan of it, mainly because of the execution. Mm-hmm. I really like the technical. I think they're nailing the technical aspects of it. When it comes to execution, I'm not a fan. I don't like the monologuing in the ring. I don't like a lot of the performances can be hammy from time to time. I think it's very community theater in a lot of aspects from everyone but Joe Anoa'i. I think he's fantastic. I think Sami Zayn was fantastic. I think everybody else in their orbit is rising tide lifts all ships. We'll just leave it at that. So I can look at this from a critical perspective and take personal opinion out of it and tell you why something is working, even if it's not working for me.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to my personal thing, I am on the ride. I want to see what they do with it before I can go back and say, this is what this was. Like I said, I don't like predictions. I don't like saying, well, this is clearly what, like, if you listen to our show, we never do, oh, this is clearly what's going to happen. This is going to be this, and this is going to be that. I have zero interest.
Except for
in
Roman Reigns
playing
getting
that.
pinned.
Yeah,
And look what happened. I'm paying for that massively.
Yeah. Well, we don't like to do the prediction game because we're always wrong.
Every time we
that's
do,
typically
we're
why.
wrong. No, I just like, I kind of like just seeing where it's playing out. I mean, like, but if just, like I said, strictly speaking, as opposed to like by the book, Roman should be a different person by the end of all this. He should be, realistically, he should be broken and like he should have nothing left, right? This story should end with Roman Reigns, a broken man.
And the only way that he's going to, the only way that he's going to be able to change is if he gets humbled. And the only way he can get humbled is by losing that title. And then of course, losing, there's two things that are the most important to him, right? It's the titles and it's the bloodline. He's already lost most of the bloodline. Now he's got to lose the title, and then he can kind of then start working his way back up into being a top babyface. And, one thing about those, Roman's very much an anti-hero. I know people want to call him a heel, but when I saw him in WrestleMania, he was the most popular guy in the building. Everybody loved him, right? He's playing a heel character in the wrestling context, but people love him so much. It's like I mentioned Yellowstone. It's Tony Soprano. Yeah. Tony Soprano, one of the most evil characters of all time that everybody loved because yes, he was evil and he did bad things to these people, but he loved his family. Right. And he did have some heart to him. He did have good in him. Well, people know that about Roman Reigns. They've witnessed him have good in him. He just happens to be bad right now, but they know who he is really. Right. This is a cancer survivor that has just been in a tight knit family who is just super insecure now because he finally got the world title and he was rejected by his audience. Right. And so go ahead, JD.
Oh, I love how you use the term anti-hero because that's exactly what it is. He might be the quote unquote heel, but he's not the villain of the story because your villain is your antagonist, and the antagonist's job is to stand in the way of the protagonist. And the protagonist of the story is Roman Reigns. It's all about him. It's his story. He is at the center of this universe. So he isn't the good guy, so to say, but he is the center. He is the protagonist. Anti-hero is the perfect term for it, and that's exactly what he is.
Yeah. And people will say, well, maybe Jay is the protagonist. No, Jay is not the protagonist. Jay is Christopher Moltisanti, right? And Tony Soprano might choke his ass out after a car accident. Spoiler alert for those people who have not watched The Sopranos. But so this whole thing revolves around Roman. It's like his world. And he's an asshole to some members of his family. I get the feeling at one point somebody's going to attack members of his family and he's going to come to their aid because I can beat up my family, but you can't beat up your family. And that is a big part of the big time family dramas that we see on television.